When my husband stood in front of his friends and said, "I built this life on my own." I smiled. I didn't correct him. I didn't interrupt. I didn't remind him. I just stood there, holding my hands together, feeling something quiet crack inside me. It wasn't anger. It wasn't shock. It was a soft kind of sadness. The kind that settles deep in your chest when you realize you've been slowly disappearing. I had stood by him through everything. Through the long nights. Through the empty fridge. Through the years when dreams were postponed and promises were pushed aside. And yet, in that moment, it was as if I had never been there at all. I remember the room clearly. The warm lights. The sound of polite laughter. The way people nodded at his words. No one looked at me. I stood near the wall, just slightly out of the circle, like a piece of furniture that had always been there. Useful. Quiet. Easy to forget. As he talked about his struggles, his hard work, his journey, I listened. Every sentence felt familiar, because I had lived those years too. Only my name was missing from the story. I didn't cry that night. Not then. I waited until we were home. Until the door closed behind us. Until the house was quiet again. I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I had paid bills, folded laundry, helped children with homework, and planned meals around tight budgets. That table had heard all my worries, but it had never heard my complaints. I touched the surface with my fingers and thought, when did I become invisible? I wasn't always quiet. I wasn't always in the background. There was a time when I had dreams too. Simple ones. Gentle ones. The kind you carry when you believe love means building something together. But somewhere along the way, I learned to step back. To wait. To make space. I told myself it was temporary. That one day, he would look at me and see everything I had given. I didn't know that day would never come. That night, as he slept peacefully, beside me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of his breathing. And for the first time in many years, I wondered something I had never allowed myself to ask before. What happens when the person you stood behind for a lifetime forgets you were ever there? I met my husband when I was still learning who I was. I was not young in age, but young in hope. I believed in simple things back then. Hard work. Loyalty. Staying. He had a smile that made you feel safe. Not flashy. Not loud. Just steady. He talked about the future like it was something solid. Something we could shape together. We didn't have much when we started. A small place. Old furniture. More dreams than money. But we had plans. Or at least I thought we did. In those early years, I worked wherever I could. Small jobs. Long hours. Whatever helped keep us moving forward. When he came home tired, I listened. When he doubted himself, I reminded him who he was. I learned quickly how to carry worry quietly. How to stretch meals. How to smile even when I felt afraid. When children came, my world grew smaller, but fuller. School mornings, packed lunches, late nights with sick little bodies curled against mine. He was busy then, always working, always chasing the next step. And I understood. I told myself this was what partnership looked like. Someone has to hold the ground while the other reaches higher. So I held it. I stopped thinking about my own plans. They felt selfish somehow, like wanting more than my share. When people asked what I did, I said, I take care of the home. And I meant it with pride. Because our home mattered. Our children mattered. His dreams mattered. Years passed quietly like that. One turning into another. We celebrated milestones. Paid off debts. Moved into a better place. From the outside, it looked like success. Inside, I was slowly learning how to shrink. I learned not to interrupt. Not to ask too much. Not to need too loudly when he talked. I listened. When decisions were made, I adjusted. It wasn't that he was cruel. That's important to say. He wasn't unkind. He just grew used to me being there. Always steady. Always supportive. Like a wall you show off your house against, but never thank. I don't think he noticed when I stopped talking about myself. When my stories became shorter. When my opinion softened. And I didn't complain. Because I believed love meant endurance. I believed that one day, when things slowed down, We would finally sit together and see each other again. I didn't realize how much time was passing. I didn't realize how easy it is for someone to forget the person who never leaves. The changes did not arrive all at once. They came softly, like dust settling where no one looks anymore. At first, it was small things, little moments that felt strange but easy to ignore. He stopped asking my opinion, not suddenly, just slowly. If I shared a thought, he would nod, then move on, as if he had already decided. At dinner, his phone stayed on the table, face up, buzzing now and then. I would pause mid-sentence when it lit up. He didn't notice. Sometimes I would finish my story anyway. Sometimes I wouldn't. He started saying, "I more than we. I worked hard for this. I built this. I made it happen." I told myself he was just proud. And maybe he was. But something inside me felt unseen. There were evenings when we sat in the same room, but lived in different worlds. The television talked. The clock ticked. Silence filled the spaces where conversation used to live. I would ask about his day. He would answer in short sentences. When I talked about mine, he listened with half an ear. Not unkindly, just distracted. I began choosing my words carefully, only sharing what felt necessary. I didn't want to bother him. I didn't want to sound small. One afternoon, I suggested we take a short trip. Just a few days. Like we used to. He didn't look up when he said, "Maybe later." Things are busy. Later never came. I started noticing how tired I felt. Not in my body. In my heart. I carried memories alone now. Old jokes. Private smiles. Sometimes I laughed at something he didn't remember anymore. At family gatherings, people praised him. His work. His success. They turned to me and smiled politely, as if I were part of the furniture. I stood beside him, smiling, quiet. I told myself this was normal, that long marriages change shape, that love matures into something calmer, less noisy. But calm shouldn't feel lonely. One evening I tried to talk. Not a fight, not an accusation, just a soft truth. "I feel a little invisible sometimes," I said. He looked surprised, almost confused. "You're always here," he replied. And that was the problem. I was always here. So constant I blended into the background. After that, I spoke less. It felt safer to disappear quietly than to ask someone to see me and fail. I folded myself smaller, like I had learned to do years ago. But this time, something inside me started to ache. Not anger, not resentment, just a deep, tired sadness. The kind that settles in your chest and stays. I didn't know it then, but we were already drifting apart. Not because of shouting, not because of betrayal, but because forgetting is sometimes worse than leaving. And I was being forgotten. One quiet day at a time, there is always a moment. Not loud, not dramatic. Just a moment that changes how you see everything. For me, it happened on an ordinary afternoon. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I was in the kitchen, washing dishes slowly. The window was open, and I could hear a neighbor's radio playing somewhere far away. I remember thinking how peaceful it sounded. Then his phone rang. He answered it in the living room. I wasn't listening at first. But then I heard his voice change. It became lighter, warmer. The voice he used to save for me. I didn't mean to listen. I really didn't. But when someone you love suddenly sounds happy in a way you haven't heard in years, your heart notices. He laughed. I stood still, my hands wet, the plate slipping slightly in my grip. "I'll handle it," he said. "Yes, of course." "No, she won't mind." She. That word landed hard. When he hung up, I dried my hands and walked into the room. "What was that about?" I asked gently. He hesitated. Just for a second. Then he said, "I made plans for Saturday." I waited. "With who?" I asked. He shrugged. "A work thing. Dinner." "We had plans," I said softly. Not accusing. Just stating a fact. He frowned, as if searching his memory. "Oh," he said. "I forgot." Forgot. Not cancelled. Not discussed. Forgot. Something inside me cracked. Quietly. "I'll be home late," he added, already reaching for his phone again. I nodded. That night, I lay awake beside him. His breathing was steady, peaceful. Mine was not. I thought about all the times I remembered for both of us. Appointments, birthdays, dreams. I thought about how often I stepped aside so he could step forward, and how easy it was for him now to step past me. A few weeks later, it happened again. Then again. Plans forgotten. Promises delayed. My presence assumed. Until one evening, I asked a question I had been avoiding. "Do you still need me?" I said. He looked at me like the question came from nowhere. "What kind of question is that?" he replied. I swallowed. I said slowly, "Do you still see me?" He didn't answer right away. That silence told me everything. "I've just been busy," he finally said. "You understand." I nodded again. I always nodded. But something inside me stopped nodding that day. I realized then that love doesn't disappear all at once. Sometimes it fades because one person keeps carrying it alone. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I was just tired of holding space for someone who no longer held space for me. That night, I sat at the kitchen table long after he went to bed. The light above me hummed softly. I folded my hands and looked at them. Hands that had worked. Hands that had comforted. Hands that had waited. And for the first time in many years, I asked myself a different question. What about me? That question didn't bring fear. It brought clarity. And once clarity arrives, nothing stays the same. After that night at the kitchen table, I didn't make any sudden moves. There was no shouting, no packing bags in the dark, just a slow, steady shift inside me. I began to notice myself again. In the mornings, I made my tea and sat by the window instead of rushing to ask him what he needed. I watched the light come in. I listened to the quiet. It felt strange at first, like standing still after walking for years without rest. He noticed small things. "You seem different," he said one afternoon. I smiled. "I am," I replied. And for the first time, I didn't explain myself. I started doing things that had nothing to do with being useful. I took longer walks. I reread old books I loved. I called friends I had slowly drifted away from. Each small choice felt like breathing again. One evening, he came home late, as usual. But this time, I didn't wait up. I had already eaten. I was already in bed, reading. He stood in the doorway for a moment. "You didn't call," he said. I closed my book gently. "You didn't either," I answered. Not angry, just honest. That night, we talked. Really talked. Not about schedules or money or chores. About distance. About forgetting. About how love changes when one person stops paying attention. He listened. I could tell it was uncomfortable. "But discomfort is where truth lives that I didn't realize," he said quietly. I looked at him and thought about all the years I realized everything for both of us. "I know," I said. I wasn't asking him to fix anything. I wasn't begging. I was simply standing where I belonged. In the days that followed, something shifted. Not magically. Not perfectly. But there was effort. And I learned something important. Even if nothing had changed, I would have been okay. Because I had already chosen myself. I learned that staying does not mean shrinking. And leaving does not always mean walking away. Sometimes resolution is just refusing to disappear. I forgave him, not because he asked, but because carrying bitterness would only make me smaller. I forgave myself too, for waiting so long to matter to myself. One morning, as we sat together drinking coffee, he reached for my hand. It felt different, not like ownership, like presence. And I realized something gentle and true. Love does not need to be loud to be real, but it must be mutual. I don't know what tomorrow holds. None of us do. But today, I know who I am. And that is enough. Now, when I look back over all those years, I don't see a woman who was weak. I see a woman who loved deeply. I see someone who stayed when it was hard, who carried more than her share, who believed that love meant endurance. And for a long time, it did. But love should not erase you. It should not make you smaller with time. It should not turn you into a quiet shadow in your own home. I used to think being needed was the same as being loved. I was wrong. Love is not just showing up. It is being seen. It is being asked. It is being remembered. I learned that even after many years, it is not too late to speak gently but firmly. It is not too late to change how you stand in a room. It is not too late to choose yourself without anger or blame. I am still married, but I am also still me. I laugh a little louder now. I rest without guilt. I say no when my heart is tired. And when I say yes, it comes from choice, not habit. If you are listening to this and feel unseen, please hear this softly. Your love matters. Your time matters. Your presence is not something people should get for free. You do not need to shout to be strong. You do not need to leave to reclaim yourself. Sometimes strength is simply remembering who you were before you learn to disappear. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is step back into your own life. That is what I did. And for the first time in many years, I am finally home.